Epion told me you're an obstruction to the path that I've chosen. I don't think Epion is mistaken. I see.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Zaku Talk. I am your host, Patrick Skeyhill. This season, G versus Wing, and that means my co-host is the secret robot.
Bob Skerry.
It's not very secretive at all. I knew right away you were a robot.
What do you mean? I'm just working on my beatboxing.
And
you
of course,
suspect.
And of course, on the audio boards is Lef Van Rensselaer. All right, episode 37 of both these shows this week. But before we get into that, Bob, how's your week been going?
My week has been fantastic. Ever since I started listening to a sleep track at night at 432 hertz, which apparently is supposed to be good for the brain, that's been helpful for me. I've been a little lackadaisical on getting back to my pre-work meditation, but I've been pretty mellow for the most part. And I had a wonderful Saturday with the Svara Project.
What is that?
The Svara Project is a parent nonprofit group that is working on developing vocal health for those who are vocal users, as one of the two founders will call them. She will also call them vocal athletes, due to the fact that your vocal cords, an example that was given me, when you listen to an orchestra, they will often tune to A440. For a vocalist to do the same, their vocal cords are vibrating at 440 times a second, and that's going to cause a lot of damage if not done properly. So one of them is a very well-known doctor in terms of vocal health. The other one is a person she has developed a device that I should be seeing today. I purchased myself, called the Voice Straw. If you go to voicestraw.com, or if you want to follow Mindy Pack, as in I'm packing an object, or Dr. Gupta, she also goes by Dr. G in the right circles. The two of them have made this wonderful series of events that people get into. I paid to go to day 2, which is about voiceover career development. And I've been able to follow several voice actors and have gotten into very light touch, barely hovering over the skin touch, with a few well-known voiceover artists such as Cissy Jones.
All right. Well, that does sound interesting. For you other vocal workers out there, maybe that's something you should check out. For me, a pretty quiet week. Some location scouts for the pilot, some more grants for the feature. Haven't yet had a follow-up meeting with our new animator, but that will be happening tomorrow from the recording. So, I'll have some updates for that next episode. Well, then, why don't you tell us, Bob, about what happened in episode 37 of G Gundam?
Make me.
I can't. We can just go to Gundam Wing. You're very belligerent today for a relaxed person.
I'm in a good mood, which is why I'm trying to toy with you. Episode 37 of G Gundam. Saisaishi's new attack, Blazing Dragon Gundam. Or, in Japanese, Shinryusei Kochoken Moeyo Dragon Gundam. They say Saisaishi's new attack in the English because they didn't want to go through the whole name of the attack. It's Shin Meteor Butterfly Sword is what it translates to when I look at it here. And I'll get into that after we get through the description here. The day before he is to fight Domon, Saisaishi isn't at all worried about the match. However, after finding and reading his father's will, he decides to win the Battle Royale to revive the Shaolin Temple, which was one of his father's wishes. In the battle, it looks like Domon is winning and that Saisaishi will lose. Domon rips both of Saisaishi's arms off. Then, Saisaishi goes into hyper mode and performs the Shinryusei Kochoken, a move that sacrifices the fighter. The Emperor of China stops the fight and says he will grant Saisaishi's request to revive the Shaolin Temple if Saisaishi can win the Battle Royale.
That all happened. I can confirm that.
Okay, and what about you? What was going on over in Gundam Wing?
Well, over here we have the Zero versus Epion. Zero, Basasu, Epion. I'm just surprised that in the Japanese characters, they put in verses, but in the transcription, they spelled out how they would say it.
Yes, because they want to just show that, yeah, it is going to be sounding exactly like that.
All right, in this episode, Zex arrives at the Sand Kingdom too late and cannot prevent its collapse. And he ends up fighting Hero, but their battle ends in a draw when the Zero system overwhelms each of them, and they exchange Gundams before parting ways. Relena reluctantly takes Duke Dermail's offer to become the new representative of Romefeller. Meanwhile, at the lunar base, the uncompleted Libra is hijacked by the White Fang Revolutionary Army as they begin their quest to take space back from Romefeller, and Tubarov is killed during Wu Fei's attack on the lunar base.
I can confirm that all these things happened, although to a much greater degree.
He's much more sure that they happened. In this episode of G Gundam, I'm pretty okay with what we got. No major complaints.
I figured you would.
This is pretty much what I've been lobbying for the last 2 weeks, and we got it all there.
We got more out of Saisaishi. We did show that he is, in fact, more well-developed than George Tassan.
Yeah. Yes.
I think it would have been interesting for Zui-san, I think it was.
I don't know. Who's that?
The taller, thinner one of the,
gotcha.
the chorus there.
Yeah.
Him having the understanding that something is not right with how Saisaishi is handling his training that day.
Yeah.
I feel like there should have been more attention brought to that. Or like if he had been holding on to this letter to give to Saisaishi when he was older, probably would have had that in a more important pocket somewhere in his belongings. Maybe notice when he couldn't find it that day when trying to put his shit back together. Because I don't think Sai would have been putting everything back exactly how it was when he fell on top of everything and busted up their room.
Yeah, some narrative shortcuts there. Mostly, I wouldn't sort of bring them up. They're kind of small quibbles for me. I like that this is probably the most that these two monks have not talked at the same time. And it allowed them to kind of feel like different characters, where Costello Monk was like worrying about Saisaishi and being suspicious, and Abbott Monk was just like, it's fine. Relax, bruh. So
yeah, that
was exciting. I actually don't, I for the type of character that he is, the slapstick character, I sort of buy or believe the way that he finds it. Sort of wants to sleep in, falls through the ceiling because he's scared of a mouse, happens to land on a letter. A little convenient, but kind of believable with the type of character we have. And I have this odd, they go back to Saisaishi showing off he's like an Iron Chef. And I really like this trait about him. I don't know why, but it's a little detail that I appreciate they give to this troublemaking kind of buffoonish character. They don't have to do it in there. It's not necessary, but it just adds a little something to this archetype. And so I kind of like that. Multifaceted, a bit strong, but it's something they
compared to everything else. Yeah. He might as well be played by Daniel Day-Lewis.
It's something this show could have very easily not done and overlooked, or just not realized they could do, but they did it. So I'm grateful that they did.
Sure.
Yes, Emperor seemed to be back in vogue in China. Just decided, we tried the other thing. We don't like it as much. Let's go Emperor again.
Well, yeah, I mean, I figure the figurehead thing works. And when did they go full communist? Was that back in World War II? Was it post-World War?
Yes, it was during World War II.
Okay, because I don't know when the Maoist regime started.
So that started a little late. Like, yeah, another guy, Sun something, is the one kind of kicking it off, and then Mao kind of like, similar to what happened in Russia, Mao kind of stabs him in the back, and then he takes over. Yeah,
don't you love how that works? Man, it's almost like the Rockefeller situation is very similar here. But yeah, no, I think they did it for maintaining the flavor and the recognition that even if the situation in Neo China didn't change too much, having a figurehead in this fashion probably fits.
Yeah, you need somebody that he can appeal to. Similar to what it's very similar to kind of what happened with George. That's the one bit they kind of borrowed from that. But in this one, even they have the chance for Saisashi to show Domon his technique early, but he doesn't because he's smarter than the other two, and he's like, "Ooh, let me not play my trump card right away."
Yeah. Well, so that's what's another interesting thing is that he does it in panic, pulls it back, and he's the only one so far that has not shown his special technique.
I know. I appreciate it. I'm like, okay,
thing.
I like this. I like what he's doing here. It's good.
Yeah, I love it.
Here's something that likely bothered you. I've sort of overlooked it because it's not what they're going for, but I imagine you thought when his arms got ripped off, Saisashi should be in a lot of pain right here, right? Because he has no arms anymore.
I bought it. I bought it because
at
this point he's in a do or die situation. Yeah. And he has resigned himself to sacrificing his life. So when he lost his arms, he felt the pain. But just like how the thing that bothered me was his tail whip thing that he has on his head got ripped off, and that somehow let down his hair.
Yeah.
That bothered me more.
And he's still moving his arms around, too. So, like, he must...
Well, yeah, because it's not like his physical arms have broken.
Yeah, but isn't it supposed to be the sensation that he doesn't have arms anymore?
It's haptic feedback. It's like, okay, I feel that there is a disconnect between my arms and that. The pain occurs because it's supposed to be nerve-based, but it's not like, oh, man, the arms have actively been severed.
But if it's nerve-based, then you could sort of like dampen the nerves, right? And you wouldn't feel the arms anymore.
I guess. Right? But if you note it too, like, even if he's not like having the hang down, it's not like his whole arm was ripped off. It's just the forearm, like from the elbow down. It would make sense that you could still move like elbow stuff up. And he's only ever doing like low arm stuff or just trying to hold his arms to himself. So he realizes he can't use his arms. I can buy that.
At the beginning of the show, when they say this is going to be the match, right? The narrator does his bit. When they write out the Gundam's name on screen, they actually call it the God Gundam in English.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It's not changed to Burning Gundam. So I wonder if that might have confused viewers as they were watching it and were like, what? That's not what it's called.
Well, I wonder if it's because you're watching it on disc, right? You're not watching elsewhere.
No.
It might have been something that they were able to blur out or get rid of in the Toonami boot,
could be true.
Where they would have done like one of those hyper focus in. Mm-hmm. We've seen plenty of those in these anime things for edits. And rather than have two variations of the visual, they probably just continue to use the audio from the English without having to worry about any alteration to the Japanese video. Otherwise, you're basically putting in twice as much video.
Saisashi has learned this butterfly attack. I, one, have no idea how it works as an actual attack. And two, I'm unsure why it's a kamikaze attack. Will you explain this to me, Bob?
I will do the best to my understanding. I haven't done any in-depth with this, but I do know the trope.
Okay.
So the idea here is that much as a butterfly emerges from its chrysalis and is able to flit around beautifully and attach other butterfly-related things. Hey, if it flaps its wings on one side of the world, it can cause a tornado on the opposite side. You're combining a bunch of these concepts to create this idea of releasing all of your energy for this one final transformation, this one final burst of energy, that when you are done from the adrenaline push and all these other chemical or spiritual pushes, you won't have anything left. You can't survive exerting that much energy. By doing that, he is willing to sacrifice himself to ensure the victory. And even if he has to die in that moment, he'll have at least gone far enough to prove that he could have brought the Shaolin Temple back and hopefully convince the Emperor and everybody else.
Okay.
I think he was less concerned about it for the Emperor's sake here and more concerned about proving to Domon that I'm not going to fall to you. I might be the kid, but I am a capable warrior, you know?
So it's the type of martial attack is like a Dragon Ball Z energy attack.
Yeah, and they've used it in other series before too. Not just in Gundam, but like Naruto has an entire clan based on this. There's the fat kid that you see very early on as one of the ninja. He has like the swirls on his face. I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head.
I think we'll survive.
This heavyset ninja is part of a clan who has a very specific capability where when they activate a certain jutsu, it allows them to burn off all the caloric energy that they keep stored on their person and use it as a devastating attack. However, if they maintain the transformation for too long, it can kill them, which is why they have to constantly be taking in calories and eating. So it's not an uncommon thing to have this butterfly transformation effect. And it is often associated to the idea that when a butterfly forms from its chrysalis, it has burned off so many calories that it had when it was in its fat little larval state that it is now this tiny thing that gets to live briefly before fading into memory.
And speaking of Dragon Ball Z, there's a hilarious moment where Domon is watching Allenby and Saisashi fight on the boat. And he says, wow, this fight looks great. And what you see animated-wise is sort of each of their torsos hanging in the air and a bunch of squiggly lines moving in between them. You know, just a limitation of the animation budget at the time, making Domon's line sound a little silly. But for Domon talking about how something looks, and then we look at it and we go, well, that doesn't really look like anything. It's funny. And Dragon Ball Z would do this where they're just like, what we're watching is Piccolo moving his head back and forth, and like that's all we're seeing of a fight that he's watching. And he's just like, my goodness, this fight is intense. You know, the information dissemination they use here, I like. We don't know what's in the letter for a good chunk of the episode. There's an interesting tension there, especially it helps since Saisashi doesn't really arc per se. Like he's a little something in the beginning, he's immediately something else, and he's sort of that the whole way through. So if you're not going to have that change happen over the episode, now we get a mystery of like, well, why is he that way? And that seems fine, a fine way to go about it for, you know, not your main character. So, you know, no quibbles there. So that's a great way to kind of employ that technique. We kind of can guess as we go along because it's not a sort of a surprising or an innovative thing. But one second, having us be active participants in the episode trying to gauge what that letter could have said, it brings at least an amount of effort to the viewer.
On your side, with the English, do they say when they're on the junk that, I think it's Domon talking to Allenby or it's Domon talking to somebody else on the ship, he realizes that this is the last time he's going to see Saisashi. He acknowledges that Saisashi came that night to say his goodbyes because he was willing to fight to the death tomorrow. Did they say that on your side?
Yeah, they did say that. And that drew my eyebrow up, and I'm like, well, why does Saisashi have to die? I don't understand. They could just, you know, someone doesn't have to kill him if he doesn't want to. It would be very easy to do.
It's not a matter of Domon having to do it.
Yeah.
It's a matter of knowing that he is going to fight to the death and will push himself to the very extent of his abilities.
Yeah, I get that they'll try as hard, but the other two were trying as hard, and there was no moment when I thought those two were going to die. So it felt a little odd to throw that. I don't know, it confused me a little bit, and not in a sort of a great way, but not in a way that I think is enough to bring up as a weakness of the episode. Saisashi's father in this episode, I think, is the same English voice actor as the person who plays Zex in Gundam Wing.
No shit.
He's not putting as much gravel into the voice for the Saisashi father character. It's a little bit of a lighter tone, but I think it's still the same voice actor.
I'll have to look into that on my side.
Yeah, there really isn't much I changed. Some things I look at is, you know, the mystery kind of takes care of the arc, but I wonder if you could still find a little something for him. But you get the father at the end. But that's just really sort of like finding the resolve to do the thing he's already done. I don't know if you need to examine that much. This is an episode I also think kind of suffers. This one, of the 3 episodes so far, this one suffers the most from him losing. So that one I might change. They salvage it fine with this bit they do with the Emperor that I think works better than what happened in Frenchie's episode. I don't know if I would need to change it, but it's something I look at to think if there's another way to do it. And then I think lastly, I would just set up butterflies earlier in the series having to do with Saisashi. I wouldn't shove it in your face, but I'd throw little hints there that there's some connection he has with them or something. And then it wouldn't come out of nowhere.
Now that I have given the best of my understanding of this attack,
yeah,
I will also note that I don't think it is something that is specifically about Saisaishi and this having to be his. I don't think it is indicative of him compared to the other ones having their things indicative of them. I would equate this more to much as the Emperor says, at least on my side, that this is a secret ultimate technique of the Shaolin Temple, at least per this mythology. And therefore, it has nothing to do with Saisaishi as much as it has to do with the teachings of the Shaolin Temple. So unless you're going to attach butterflies to the Shaolin Temple, which I don't believe is an actual artifact of the modern day Shaolin Temple, that it would just be a lot of hokum.
Well, then, that's what I mean. That's fine, because you've unlocked the hokum anyway. You just have, it just feels like it comes out of nowhere. So now it feels kind of cartoonish. So I would put the hokum on the Shaolin Temple, even though it's not a modern day thing for them, because also they don't modern day have an emperor, and we've already jumped the shark here. What Chinese would do. Yeah, but it doesn't even have to be like specifically, like maybe wherever their Shaolin Temple is in episode 3, the butterflies happen to be kind of flying through a garden that's nearby. Like, it doesn't have to be very overt, like just a little bit there. And like he's training near the waterfall and like a butterfly happens to fly by. Like, you wouldn't even really think twice about it. But when you went back and watched it later on, you'd be like, oh, hey, that would be just a little seed I would plant there. But overall, no, I can't really complain about this. I've been bitching to get something like this. We got pretty close. Everything else are just sort of minor quibbles, so no real complaints from me. Some setting up of this Allenby versus Rain love triangle thing, I guess, and yeah.
Well, it's becoming a little more overt, but I think the last line really does help to solidify that it's not that she holds it too much against Allenby.
Yeah.
Because she realizes that it's a language that she can't speak, and that might be this crux where it's not I hate Allenby as much as I can't meet Domon on this level that he seems to meet Allenby on. So it's I think more of a frustration with Domon than Allenby.
Allenby wearing big 90s cartoon sneakers that I feel like I saw a lot, right?
My love of Chuck Taylor's comes directly from my love of cartoon and anime shoes.
Okay.
It's also the reason why I like to wear my chocolate brown loafers. It's the exact same thing. The generic animated character shoe. Yeah.
I would agree that is the generic animated shoe.
As far as Gundam Wing is concerned, I want to do the end first.
Yep. Okay.
I don't understand why Relina smiles after making this very depressing choice at the sunrise. Like, in some ways I get it. And if it's supposed to be effectively fodder for when we do our flashback bits, fine, I'll live. Relina has been up for hours after being brought to the Romefeller compound. She has just made a incredibly difficult decision to now be the face of Romefeller, which will now make her a target. Especially now that, even though she doesn't know it yet, the White Fangs are going to end Romefeller. And so now she's been staying up all night and she's seen the light of the dawn. I don't think that having seen the dawn right now, literally just a moment after she had to make this forced decision, she herself said, it's the only choice I could have made. This was the only choice I had given to me. To then look out and have like this bright anime eye and like large for her, especially open mouth smile. It left me very confused. It's about as confusing to me as why we have the Relina Safari at the end of every episode.
There are two very lazy metaphors that happen in this episode. One is the tea Duke de Mel is talking about, where he says, I don't know if you'll like this tea, but give it a try. It might grow on you. And that is obviously, yes, the deal he is offering her. And then the sunrise is another one where it's like, she's made this decision. Things are looking their bleakest as we enter Act 3.
Dawn of a new day.
And she's like, there's hope. Aha. There is a chance that if I'm queen of the whole world, there might, especially since people don't seem to like Duke Dermail, there might be something I can do about this.
I'm not I'm not happy about it. I accept it.
I would definitely relook at that if we were doing this. I might also add a segment where we get to see what went on in her head that made her change her mind. The manga sort of skips over that and basically says, Relina, you should be queen. And she's like, no. And he's like, but all these people are going to die. And then you actually see shots of battles that Wu Fei's doing and Duo and Hiro and Zex are fighting. He's like, the more you don't agree, then the more these people are going to keep dying. And then she goes, okay. And like, that's sort of how it is. No, it happens right then and there.
Yeah. Well, I will say that, again, if we were to do some polishing of this now, I would like actually for it to be 3 points of this series of events where we see her there and she has the conversation with Duke Dermail, T-bit, everything. He's obvious shitbag, fine. Part 2, literally at like 4 a.m. or something, like the darkest it could be, especially if we're trying to like ham-handedly put out this dawn of a new day thing. At that darkest hour, we see her make the decision. Give Duke Dermail my acceptance of his thing. Fine. I want a period where we really get into her sleep-deprived mind, and we see that, you know, she's having second thoughts after having already given the option. Does this change me? Am I a fool for basically foregoing my ideal to realize my ideal? And in those dark moments, for her to get on like teary, closed eyes, the first ray of sun, and that catches her. She walks over to the window. She sees the dawn over the horizon. I would buy the smile and the hope of a new day then, but I need to see more questioning. I need to see more depression if I'm going to have that hit of the upper at the end of the episode.
Yes, I too need to know how she gets from point A to point B. That would be great. They didn't do it here, but we could fix it somewhere later on. So it's your note of Duke Dermail in the show as a shitbag, very true. The manga actually sort of a little more interesting. He gives roughly the same speech, but it's a lot more cogent. And it sort of plays off of something Tubarov says. That's also a little cleaned up for the manga version, where they're both kind of coming at it from this Thomas Hobbes perspective, where it's not like we want to rule because we like power, blah, blah, blah. It's like humanity is such a depraved species that they will constantly fight if we don't, or like unification requires total suppression of humanity. Freedom and equality cannot coexist with unification. It's just not possible with the way they do it. And it makes them less evil, because that's an argument we've been having for 600 years over the right way to kind of govern. But it also sets them up as great antagonists for the Gundam pilots and for Treize, who seem to find some hope and redemption in humanity and believe that there is a path forward while still upholding these values that modern audiences appreciate: freedom, equality, things like that.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you saying that, because it's been a while since I've heard Thomas Hobbes be brought up in a conversation.
He doesn't come up often, does he?
No. Well, I mean, a lot of well-known philosophers. For those listening at home, while I am not a philosophy major, you know, I went theater. I chose the other option that's not going to get me a job. I believe that philosophy is a wonderful thing to listen to and to glean, to create your own perspective. It's important to get even the bare basics under you. And I think that I would like to see more use of philosophers in media in order to hide the pill in the peanut butter, so to speak.
The voice actors for Hiro and Zex doing some fun things here, where Hiro kind of comes in, the episode begins sounding like a vicious animal. Like the Zero System fully taking control of him as the episode begins. Zex transitions to kind of that same point as the episode goes on, as they're both kind of overwhelmed by the Zero Systems. So so is anything else you want to talk about, I guess, in regards to the Zex Hiro portion of the story?
Yes, I do, actually. It's funny that you mentioned the idea of the vicious animal aspect, because on my side, it's treated less animalistic, less primal, and more robotic.
Okay.
And I find that very interesting. When Hiro is looking far, far out into the horizon as Zex is making his way down to Earth and flying over the ocean. He is talking about all these things in a very calculated manner. And one of the little things that I didn't care for the subtitle versus what's being said, they use something like engaged or analyzed or whatever. But the voice actor in Japanese uses the word clear.
Okay.
And it's a very technological video gamey thing that they like to use over there. Stage clear, mission clear,
okay.
Things like that. It is a finalization. It is a executable commander response.
Yeah.
And when Zex starts succumbing to the Zero system, and I think you called the system between the two of them the Zero system. Does the Epion have the Zero system, or does it has a variation?
It has
on
a
it,
Zero-like system, but it doesn't have its own name, so I just call them both. They're both doing the same thing.
That's fair.
I
just want to make sure, because I know that they're kind of philosophically different.
Yeah, they're actually more technologically different than philosophically different. Though Trey's does have that stipulation that you have to be a loser in the Epion. There's no reason to think that you don't have to be with the Zero. Just note the mad scientist didn't say it. Where the Zero system kind of projects all of this data to you from its giant monitor. In the Epion, you actually have to wear that helmet because a cable from the Epion's computer plugs directly into the back of it and feeds the data through your visor. And really, the panels in the Epion are just kind of for location things or like backup monitors just in case something goes wrong. But it couldn't feed you the data the same way the Zero can via those screens.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we get a very brief 2001 A Space Odyssey moment when they finally get to a point where both computers, and I'm going to reference another movie here, War Games, both computers start over analyzing the situation because the pilots that are being used as the hearts of each of these
CPUs.
machines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. CPUs, it works too. They both are acting in such a way that the other one cannot find purchase on the other easily enough. So they both sort of blue screen, not just the machines themselves, but the pilots. And it's so overwhelming to the point where we get our like little psychic backlash on Hiro, where we see the hovering ethereal eyes of his own mind within himself or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's having seen that there is another part of him inside himself that freaked him out, that forced him to go to the Zero, because at least the Zero goes more towards his calculated measure and his emotional detachment that he's been so used to these past 15 years of life, compared to the Epion, which does ask you to be willing to expose yourself, something that he is not apparently ready to do.
So here's what I thought was going on, and the manga makes it a little more explicit. You may remember last week we talked about Trey's being like, the paths you've chosen do not connect to the future based on the systems you're doing. And as that fighting happens, they're both realizing that they don't have a future. And we actually get a little flash forward where we see that if they continue on the path they're on, they watch the Earth explodes for some reason. We don't know why, but that's the future that these systems are showing them. And so being overwhelmed and tired and exhausted from that, and realizing that, you know, they're fighting this fruitless battle because annihilation is going to happen if they continue on this path, that's why they decide to switch Gundams and hope that that can change the future somehow.
Mutually assured destruction. This is really just, at this point, two Gundams that are allegorical for having atomic bombs.
Yeah, and that's sort of, I guess, what the goal of the Zero
technological
system
advancement has gone so far that now we have confirmed end-all be-all. And if these two should ever meet, it's the end of the world.
It's the complete dehumanization. Well, you know, I won't talk about what they see now that they're in different suits, but the way things are going were not great. Hiro takes the Wing so Hiro doesn't want to pilot the Epion anymore. He gives it to Zex because he says, you know, Trey's built this. I think he would want you to have this. In the show, Zex is the one who has that thought. In the manga, because the Wing Zero is rebuilt with the Tall Geese, Zex says, well, then in that case, you know, since the spirit of the Tall Geese rides in the Wing Zero, I think you were the only pilot capable of respecting that. And so that's why he gives him the Wing Zero. And they hope that that can make the future that they are hoping for.
That's very interesting. And when we get off air, I do have a question that I don't want to pose for fear of going ahead of our listeners.
Yeah. And I like Hero having that line where I don't understand how that guy thinks, referring to Trey's, which is interesting, especially since she just had a very long, very detailed conversation with Trey's. Hero still isn't getting what is going on there. And Zek saying to the Epion helmet, I thought I had chosen a separate path from you, also referring to Trey's. And that's something I'll get into more in the way we go.
And I do look forward to hearing a bit more about that, but I do have one last point on this before we touch Wu Fei.
Wu Fei and the White Fang, yep.
Yeah. So with regards to the idea of the mentality of the loser, is that something that is going to be more explicitly presented to us, or is it going to be more of a personal interpretation?
It's definitely explicit.
The anime?
It's definitely explicit in the movie. I think they do talk about. I think it gets brought up again near the end of the show, but I don't remember. But it's the crux of it is possible to interpret it that way, even if the show doesn't bring it up, because of what Trey said, 2 or 3 episodes ago.
So Wu Fei, I'm less worried about the White Fang at the moment because it seems very clear that they're part of the cycle of domination and rebellion. I feel like Wu Fei here, after just seeing him a few episodes ago, has become more sociopathic than anything, and definitely feels more like a cultist that was popularized in the mid-90s than he does anybody who has a sense of justice. I do appreciate the term integrity being used, which they do use in the notes there in the subtitles, at least on my side. I feel like his desire to just effectively kill everything that is out in space is reminiscent of what was happening with Katra and the others who have piloted the Zero so far.
So he's not. So Katra was just hawking down colonies that had civilians in them. Wu Fei is going after people who are fighting, and so he's doesn't know White Fang's doing what the thing is, and he just is attacking this base where he was held captive.
But he won't hear anybody out either. Like somebody that's trying to parlay, he says, "Nah, fuck you."
Yes, and because then if he wavers, he will lose his integrity. This is what his master sort of sacrificed himself to do. Is like, do not. It's like if you let the devil speak, it's already too late, and he doesn't want to do that. In the manga version, he's actually attacking Libra, the battleship. The battleship is completed in the manga, and he's attacking it. Yeah. Duo's also there too. It just happened to both have the same plan of like, ooh, we should destroy the giant space battleship before that gets out of hand, because it has a giant fucking cannon like the Death Star. So they're destroying that, and the White Fang actually assumed that the Gundams were going to help them release space. But the Gundams, and this is what's interesting about the White Fang, one, like the show, just when you think you've got it figured out, it's going to be like, oh, the Gundams are from a fellow. Now we got another actor, and there's 12 episodes left of the show, and a new major power and number character has been introduced to us.
Which number character? Because
he doesn't get named in the show, but his name is Cans, and it's not spelled the way you think it is, and it is like Spanish for 15. And he's the guy in the vest. He's got the white hair. They call him Leader because that's his code name.
Yeah, the one that is being treated as Leader.
Gotcha. So, and then Sadichi, who was like Tubarov's like go-to guy before he betrayed him, he tries to contact the Wu Fei. And this word of integrity comes up, and Wu Fei doesn't like him because he's changing sides and he has no integrity, and he's continuing this kind of battle in space. And so that's why he keeps destroying him. And what's interesting is that these White Fang people, they're actually Star Wars. Like in another movie, it's Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, and they want to overthrow the evil empire, and we would totally be on their side. But this show has now had to do all this stuff so that when we get to these repressed people rebelling, we're like, oh, wait a minute, guys. I don't know if this is actually going to create the thing that you want. And that is a hard thing for a show to do in an environment where no matter where you are in the world, we're kind of used to those underdog stories of triumph against great odds being like inspiring and impactful. And that's one of the difficult things the show has to do.
Well, I mean, they do a great job of it in that, for any side of a thing, it is very easy to look at insurrectionists and otherwise as villains if you are the ruling power. I mean, not to get too political here, but just look at America over the past handful of years after World War II. We think that we are the ultimate power. We treat ourselves as such. We indoctrinate ourselves as such. And then when people rise up against us when we are doing, in fact, shitty things, we end up looking at the people who are trying to resist us as though they are villains. And that's not to say that there haven't been people that have done incredibly villainous acts against us, but it is clear why we would see them as villains, just as they would see us as villains.
Yes, but I guess what is interesting to me here is that outside of after 9/11, the majority of media property in America, despite being a ruling power, is the story of people overthrowing, the oppressors. Like we love that story. We love those stories. Those are easy to market. It's easy to get everybody behind them. And so this show could have fallen into that trap or understood it had a hard thing of kind of rewiring us. So that's why these people kind of get saved for so late in the show to kind of begin this new wave and a new era and a new revolution and an overthrow of power. It's like, I don't know, like when we began the show, it was the Alliance was controlling everybody and Five Guns wanted to destroy them, and Melina was a daydreaming high school girl. And now the epoch for Earth has shaken up like 4 times. The Alliance has pretty much echoed into this moment here. If they didn't do what they did, the White Fang wouldn't happen. And Relina's now queen of the world. Like, look at how far we've come in 37 episodes. It's seismic what this show has been able to do.
How much time has passed in the world at this point?
It'll be, when the show ends, it'll be about a year-long struggle. So right now, probably...
This all happened in 1 year.
Yeah, right now, probably 10, 11 months, and we're getting close to the end. Like, it's not, and what you think, well, that's a lot of crazy stuff going on, but like, Rome had years where it had 4 emperors, 5 emperors, 6 emperors. Imagine, like, every 2 months here in America, we got a new president, and we're like, I gotta remember this guy's name now? Shit.
You're a Romophile. You're, in fact, a Romofeller.
Yes. So, like, these kinds of volatility does happen. And Rome, we could say, well, it's not on the scale of the whole world, but Rome was fucking gigantic, It was huge. Yeah. And and some people, it was so huge and information was so like hard to travel back then. Some people didn't even know the Roman emperors had changed in the course of this year because they were happening too quickly. By the time they found out there was a new one, it was already too late. That guy was dead.
That's wild.
So I'm very excited to have the the White Fang pop up. Be yet another upheaval. It's very exciting to me.
Yeah. And so I think that pretty much sums up the episode, unless there's any point or beat that we might have missed.
Yeah, I'm trying to just look at the manga and see if anything has changed. The only thing, I guess, is Tuberov doesn't die at this point in the manga. They save it for a little later. I can't explain why until we get later in the show. And then I think it does a little bit of a better job how they deal with it.
Well, you say that. I will say that I appreciate the way that they handled Tuberov in this episode, in that, he continues to the very end when he realizes that he has lost his power into trying to self-actualize the idea that he is, in fact, omnipotent. Yeah. And I think that that's a wonderful way to show a despot who believes they have the ultimate power, the ultimate mind, the ultimate everything, to have to be at the computer trying to enact that power and realize that their power is not as great as they thought. I thought that was a great end to him, but I will be interested in seeing how the difference is in the manga later.
Yeah, the end to him is sort of fine. I have no problem with that by itself, and I like that he even gets sort of a line where he's like, you guys are as delusional as trays, and he runs off. But like what they do is they tie it in with something else, and I think merging those two together is better. I think it's a lot tighter of a story when you kind of are able to lump those guys up together.
The anime part, not the manga part.
Yeah, there's another thing that's going to happen in the anime, and in the manga, they both kind of happen concurrently. I think that works better. But both versions, I like that Tuberov just sort of dies ignominiously. Like, Wufei doesn't even know he's doing it. He's just like, fuck it all. This is all got to go. It's all a war property, so it's got to go. The military-industrial complex is being wiped out. if you didn't want to
Right.
die, you should have not decided to pick up guns. And then here we are.
Don't make me like Wu Fei now. Like the way that you're depicting it, I'm here for that.
Well, that's what I'm telling you. When the first couple times I watched, I didn't get what Wu Fei's thing was. He was my least favorite, but he's sort of up there now, having because it's a much more complicated thing they're doing with him.
Okay, fair.
Okay, well now we can go to the way we go.
Like sand through the hourglass, this is the way that we go.
Yeah, so what I thought that I had in my head as Zex is saying this line, of like, I think Treize would have wanted me to have this. I thought my paths were parted from him, but I guess they're not. Is like, we have forgotten that they do have this backstory of friendship and their long ties, and Treize is the reason why Lady Yun doesn't kill Relina, because he owes this favor to Zex. And I would be interested in like a full-on Gundam prequel where we kind of examine like Treize and Zex and Noin and Lady Yun kind of rising up the ranks of Oz, and getting to the point where the show begins and seeing what their exploits are like and how they kind of bonded and became friends, and, maybe what they thought about war or working for the Alliance at the beginning and how they transform into the characters at the beginning of Gundam Wing. I think that would be very interesting. But then the other problem with that thought was like, well, I don't trust anyone to write it. I don't think anyone would write Treize correctly. So now my thought is like, well, how do I write a Gundam Wing prequel? Because that is the only person I trust.
Fanfic.net. That's how you do it. Fanfic.net.
Yeah, that's where I went.
I will piggyback off that for a second. I think the way you go about it, you have to completely remove any possibility of people realizing that it's Gundam Wing related at the get-go. So as they're in Oz or whatever iteration they're on to, it's Proto-Oz, so it's not called that. And they're under a situation where they have to go by some sort of a standardization of title. They're not allowed to use their names because they're being trained in a way that makes them above humanity but below the self. So you give them new names, perhaps alphabet based, Alpha, Beta, Delta, Gamma, something like that, because it feels more militaristic. And then at the end, or somewhere in the center end of the series, acknowledge them because they start giving each other their names because they have to bond. So this is when Un gets to know that Treize is Treize. And then we get to go, holy shit, this was a prequel?
I think the code names work. I don't know if you could do Proto-Oz because it is canon that it was Oz back then. And then like how you would play, if you could play with the code names, which I think is a fine idea. Like a lot of that would change depending on what medium it is in and how it is produced. And likely if it is produced if it's not just me writing, little fan novels in my room, you would want to heavily market that it's a Gundam Wing prequel. So you just keep open to possibilities and take advantage of whatever distribution and medium you're in.
But I mean, I'm just saying that if you want to do it based on the merits of the story and less on the fact that it's part of the saga, like Final Fantasy VII, I think I would like the stories more if I didn't realize that they were being part of this greater mythology right away. I might give it more credence if I understood that it was its own property that is now being attached after the fact. After I've already eaten the broccoli, I will be glad to know that the broccoli was actually cauliflower or whatever the fuck.
Well, that's interesting because I think I disagree. Overall, no, in part. I think where I have problems with the spin-offs are the ones that didn't feel as well justified. I think Crisis Core and Before Crisis were very good properties to add. And I think they gave a lot of dimension to stuff we already had. Dirge of Cerberus and Advent Children, both of which I kind of like well enough. I think the problem is they were like, I don't know, they bloated things because Final Fantasy VII wasn't really set up for a sequel. Like a lot of that wasn't really in there, and they didn't take advantage of things that were in there that they could have. Like there's a lot of stuff with these ancients and with some of the beings that were walking the earth when Genova first landed that weren't ancients, but were like these other kind of weird messenger prophet things. Like there were places to explore there. All these soldiers you have kind of brewing in tanks that are looking like monsters. There were a place to go with that. The idea that Vincent needs this redemption story is true, but I think the plot you have to put him through to get him there wasn't as well justified. So I don't think the fact that I knew that they were FF7 was good or bad for it. I think there were just some flaws in the execution of the later, especially Advent Children, which is just like Sephiroth Part 2. I think that, and that's the complaint I have about the remake, is like we're leaning a little too much on Sephiroth here. But I think that Cloud having to look back at, you know, what things happened during the game and what losses happened and what things were his fault, I think is important.
It further justifies his post-traumatic stress disorder is the way that I've been reading
it's like, I would like Advent Children if there was like no fighting. Like if it's like a grounded indie drama of like Cloud just dealing with this shit. That would be awesome. They would never do that. But, oh, man, I would be like one of 10 people that would be so on board with that.
I can't wait for the second part to hopefully give us a more absurd version of the mental break scene. But we're not a Final Fantasy VII cast yet. So I will say that the way I went actually is a thing that happened right at the top of the day.
Okay.
After I'd finished watching my episodes, I was scrolling through Twitter, and one of the people that is in my Toku fandom was taking part in a meme that's going on right now. What's one truth about the Gundam universe that would make the fan kids cry, or something to that effect?
Okay.
And this person responded, Gundam Wing is not that great. It is overhyped. And no one will admit it.
Yeah.
I typically would not respond to this sort of thing.
Oh, good Lord. Okay.
No. Hear me out.
Okay. All right.
Because it's actually that I advertised us.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Okay. So I talked, I said, I can see where you're coming from. And up until I started being a co-host on Zaku Talk podcast, and I put a link to our Spotify, I probably would have said the same. I'm up until recently a G Gundam person. Come listen to us and you'll get what I mean. I'm not saying that he's wrong.
Yeah.
Or they're wrong. I don't know the gender of the person. I did point out the fact that rather than being, well, actually, because I'm being put into that position by you, my well, actually man of Gundam Wing, I do think that there is more substance to this franchise is what I'm going to call it, because I think it's a franchise unto itself at this point.
Okay.
There is more to this franchise than I think the better part of the fandom would allow, because it has a lot more to say beyond just, hey, cool Gundams. Hey, BL fans, check this shit out. Make doujinshi left and right. I think that there is some context for philosophy and thought that belongs here, much in the way that I've always held that G Gundam has more merit to it than some of its scenes might allow for.
Well, actually, I don't think, like, of course, I love Gundam Wing. There's a lot I like about it, but the show, you know, there's a lot of flaws in it. There's a lot of things I would fix, like clean up. I think a lot of Gundam, not a lot, but I think there are
37 episodes in. I had no idea that you would clean up things per episode.
There are Gundam shows I think are better, some even much better than Gundam Wing. So, but the notion that it's overhyped, I don't think has been a factor since 2007. I think once we hit that, people just forgot Gundam Wing, or people were all on board the Gundam Wing actually not that great train. And so I don't think there's a really big clamoring for people who are like, yeah, Gundam Wing, unless they just like the models and like that's it.
People still hype it.
That's
like,
great.
I go to cons.
Where are these people?
That's awesome. Still, well, when you go to conventions or if you're online, if anybody brings up a Gundam, if it's not the a side G Gundam person, it's typically Wing is what I've seen, or it's one of the most recent ones, like Iron Blooded Orphans.
So that's what I was. So I don't go to cons like you, but in 2017, maybe it was 2016, in that era, I went to Anime Boston because I was on the hunt for, and the Rhode Island one. Because I was on the hunt.
Yeah, I know the year because you came and swung by to say hi to me at a shop.
Yeah, I was on the hunt for artists for a project I was working on at the time, but Shinji was there, a fellow Gundam fan of ours, a friend of ours, and I like had a bet where I'm like, I don't know, I bet these kids don't know these things from Gundam and stuff. Because I've often thought that I think that a lot of anime fans, they have like short memories. And so it's always about like what's in the last 2 to 5 years with them, and everything else doesn't matter or sucks. And so, like, I went around and trying to probe, question as many people as I could find to prove Shinji wrong about, like, what Gundams they are familiar with. And basically, here's what the Gundams that everybody knew. Gundam Seed, Gundam Build Fighters, and Iron-Blooded Orphans. And, like, that was it. Like, that was there. You get...
What was the average age of the individual you were speaking to?
That I don't know, but, like, maybe between 17 and 33. Well,
that's the point, though, is that if they are a newer fan in the early 30s or whatever, they probably missed out on the Toonami times, because I'm not going to be a nerd and watch Toonami. I'm not an anime fan. They would have shit on it at that time. Mm-hmm. And then the newer kids are just hopping into whatever is available to them, which is typically newer stuff, unless they have somebody else's Crunchyroll account or something.
Yeah, and I'm all in agreement with this. And my point is, I think there are more anime fans now than there are in 2000. And I think that...
Oh, certainly.
And that is why the overwhelming amount of people wouldn't overrate Gundam Wing, because they just wouldn't know it existed. So if they had to put a list of their favorite Gundams, Gundam Wing would be somewhere in the middle or the bottom. They're just like, I don't know, that looks old. I don't care.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
But I'm glad you're plugging the show. That's good.
Of course. I mean, when I can, I like to, and I might have a little bit of that again by doing a mutual plug once we get over to the Nerd Corner.
Well, then let's go on over. Let's take a walk to the Nerd Corner, where we will talk about a lot of nerd stuff. Yeah. So, I've been on here a lot talking about Philip Glass, one of my favorite composers, but another...
I still need to listen to him.
Very good. Another one of my favorite bands, been around for 20 years, has released a new album. The Gorillaz virtual band makes it very easy to keep making music. They've done a new distribution model where they're releasing music videos as like a web series sort of thing. And so they have finished that series. It was delayed a bit because of the pandemic. And so the album has come out. The album, very good. Some punk roots are kind of hidden in there. A great collaboration with Elton John is on this disc.
Really?
Yep. They even get a little cartoon version of him in the music video they've done. And there's a music video that ends the plastic beach sort of setting and then gets them to where they are in this Song Machine season 1. So that's another great music video they had. So very great. Very
definitely
great
send me the link when we're done here.
Will do. Great songs on there. I've been listening to it nonstop for like a week and a half. Really catchy stuff in there. And that's my Nerd Corner.
One last thing about your Nerd Corner. I will note, in the UK, they've always been doing that. The storyline thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, it's great.
Regular animation pieces were coming out, and it was sometimes associated with the music, like music videos. But we got fewer here in the States than they had in the UK, and they have almost an episode a track.
Yes. So it's been, they're going to do more. Those have all seasons 2 and 3. They say they've written them and like they're ready to go. They just haven't been able to create because of the pandemic. So we'll actually probably get 2 albums back to back from them very quickly.
Heck yeah.
And then I think they're going to do like just an actual movie for Netflix at some point, which again, I don't trust because Netflix, but there you go.
Yeah. So my Nerd Corner, as listeners, regular listeners might know, my wife and her friends, they have been doing their podcast, and this is not the one I'm plugging, but they do We're Not Cousins, which is a wonderful, fun podcast between 3 girls reliving Sailor Moon and talking about the good, the bad, the ugly. They do a great job of it.
Sounds like you are plugging it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm doing 2 plugs.
Okay.
But I mention this because they have been getting to develop a name for themselves, because my wife is on point with the socials and has been eyed by a up and coming, if not very strongly known, anime review podcast called Kawaii Disappointment. And they are a lovely trio of individuals. 2 of them are anime fans. One of them is budding. They're learning. And this one is being introduced by the other 2 to a variety of series, most of them very commonly known among us. Their most recent episode was Cowboy Bebop. Mm-hmm. They will talk about the poster or whatever image they send to the one that does not watch. Okay. Get their initial reactions based on just the imagery. Mm-hmm. Have them sit down and watch like the first 2 or 3 episodes of the series, and then come back and talk about their feelings about it, their desires about it. They make fun jokes. They have a very similar format to They're Not Cousins. So I'm using this as an opportunity. Kawaii disappointment. This is Bob Scary. I'm the husband to one of these three lovely ladies on They're Not Cousins, Allie, as a matter of fact. I will end both podcasts should I ever come into the fray between you two. You seem to be the Jets and the Sharks. I'm not a street gang, nor is Skeyhill. We are a neural net computer. We are a thinking machine.
Cool.
And we might be able to outthink you if we had some sort of a three-way trivia series. So just a fair note, I'm a person who likes to overboast himself. It's a good opportunity to show me my place. Just remember, Zaku Talk, we are a very thoughtful podcast.
I don't think we would win a trivia contest. All my anime references are like 20 years ago.
That's fine. I'm trying to hype us, man. They literally did wrestling promos at the girls at They're Not Cousins because they're developing such a wonderful friendship. And I think they're neat. Insert the March meme here holding our podcast. I just think they're neat.
I don't think I know that meme, but like, so is your wife friends with these people or enemies? I'm confused.
It's played as frenemies, but they have been friendly to each other on socials, and they're trying to develop a friendship. And I think it's sweet.
Okay.
And we're over here being like the goth kids from our years in high school, sitting at our table, just wearing the same things, talking about the same thing, and just like, fuck all these people. I wish they would talk to us.
I didn't know we could talk to other people. I didn't know that was an option.
We should be talking to other people. That's how these things work. And especially where this is your podcast, I'm just a guest co-host. You should absolutely be trying to reach into these other podcasters. So let me know and we can start working on that.
Yeah, because I have no idea who they are or how to do that. That is a world I don't understand.
The power of social media.
Yeah.
Keep it out of your life. Only use it for business at this point.
It's all over my head. I have no idea. Okay, well, that wraps us up here. Let us thank Lev Van Rensselaer for minding those audio boards this week. And of course, let me thank my co-host for joining me this week, as he will each and every week this season, Bob Scary.
Hey, hi, Worldwide Sentai. This is Bob Scary VOA coming at you live from Zaku Talk HQ. You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and a slew of other places by my handle, Bob Scary VOA. You can also find me at bobscaryvoa.com to listen to my demos because I am, in fact, a voiceover artist. And, you know, maybe just hire me sometime. I like to do vocal work. I'm trying to be better about being near my mic.
And I am your host, Patrick Scale. You can find my features, documentaries, short films, video essays, animations, behind-the-scenes footage, and so much more at QuixoticUnited.com and social media, presumably, with a similar sounding name. Thank you all for listening. Bob, tell the audience who loves orange soda.
Bob loves orange soda.
Is it true?
Mm-hmm. I do. I actually kind of prefer Diet Cola.
Just like me.